So yeah, quite a few announcements today. Is of course that, well, we still have our video. You've all probably seen the email that said, hey, we've lost the wonderful long-term sponsorship from Greg Pearl, who's also moved on from his role in EndWorld, hence no sponsorship for the video from Greg at the moment. But yeah, good heavens, I've forgotten the gentleman's name. Jim, I believe.
Yeah. You're right.
Oh, Jim, what's your last name?
Pearce.
Jim Pearce from Australian Health Policy.
Health Policy Analysis.
Health Policy Analysis. So big hand for Jim Pearce. And a big thanks to him. So that was a big save. For us, also, as you would have noticed, there are a heck of a lot more Data Science Sydney events these days than just this monthly CBA event, which is still and will continue to be our main event. But there are our other streams. So Ian Hansel, who is not here, has recently run yet another session of the Career and Practice stream, and there's more of that coming. And the Career and Practice stream is going to have things like panel discussions and roundtables and surveys. It's going to be a very different kind of stream, but it'll also have regular presentations like these. And again, a slightly less regular non-presentation or less presentation-oriented stream started by Charles over there. Charles, show yourself. So the Kaggle Challenge, which you've seen invitations for, and that's running, is that this week or next week, Charles? This week. This week. And welcome to the organizer team.
Thank you.
As always, a big thanks to Fabian, who's planning to run away early and still munching on pizza. Might be the last piece. Shame on you. So he says. And also stay tuned for over the next, possibly even the immediate months, and certainly next year, as Data Science Sydney starts making friends with other meetups and other organizations, and there'll be a whole lot more joint Data Science Sydney events. Now, speaking of sponsors, I'm not going to thank myself, but I am going to tell you about another important sponsor of Data Science Sydney, which is me, or to be more precise, my training organization, Prescient. And I think relevant to today's topic, you will see that we have upcoming a 3-day course. Most of our courses are 2 days, but this is a 3-day course. It's an introduction to Bayesian inference with Stan. So Stan is one of these very powerful probabilistic programming engines for doing Bayesian analysis with the very fast Hamiltonian Monte Carlo method. And indeed, the member of the Stan team responsible for making the Hamiltonian Monte Carlo method work so well as being just a whiz with Bayesian inference in general, Michael Betancourt, is coming to Sydney to run this course. So I urge you folks to show an interest, take a photo, and of course the Prescient website can be linked to from the meetup site if you're interested. Also, we do have a few more courses this year. We're sort of winding up for the year in Sydney. There are some more courses running in Melbourne, but to remind you, there is our flagship Predictive Analytics, Machine Learning, Data Science and AI course, where I don't do any coding. It's not about the coding, it's about learning the important concepts so that you actually know what you're doing as a data scientist, as a machine learning professional. So this is a course like no other in the field. We have advanced courses. We also have a quantum computing course, which is being quite popular lately. R, Python courses, advanced R, text and language. Also this data literacy course, which I have mentioned before, which is, it's not for you. It's for all those people you work with who you wish would understand data science a little bit better, or at least data a little bit better, or at least numbers a little bit better, or logic, so that they could benefit from the good work that you do as a data scientist. So data literacy needs to and will improve across organizations, just as computer literacy has done. But to hurry it along, I've got this course. Now, the other thing I want to mention is that Troy over there is taking a video of this presentation, as he does many others, and all our presentations go on the Data Science Sydney YouTube channel. Now, please be aware that the Data Science Sydney YouTube channel exists, and please subscribe to it. it's actually very important that you subscribe to it, because we need to hit a certain number of subscribers so that we can offer more goodies to you. So please do that. So lots of announcements today, but lots happening in Data Science Sydney, and as always, if you have something interesting to present, or you would otherwise like to do something or see something from Data Science Sydney, get in touch with me or Fabian or one of the other organisers. And now, the best part of this job, I get to introduce today's speaker, who is a most impressive speaker indeed. So Bassem Morris is a director at Deloitte and a very senior and distinguished actuary, and by the sounds of it, someone who's very skilled in some very non-trivial aspects of data science, specifically causal impact analysis and behavioral science. And he's going to be telling us about all those things and more with the topic of bringing data science to life. Over to you, Bassem.
Thank you, Eugene. Before I start, I have to say that I'm a big fan of the work that Eugene and the team are doing, so it's a real treat for me to be here speaking to you guys tonight. Before I start, just pull up my presentation. Here we go. Yeah, so I'll be speaking, as Eugene said, about bringing data science to life. I thought before I start, I'd make this a bit more human, maybe tell you a bit about me, so you know who's speaking to you for the next 20 minutes. So as Eugene mentioned, I am an actuary at Deloitte, and I love my job because I'm basically part of a team of data scientists and actuaries working together, trying to solve very interesting problems for our clients. I spend a lot of my time at work basically thinking of this question: how can we improve our clients' business using their data? And that's great fun, especially when you get some left field clients from a very different industry, and you've got to really dive into the industry and find out how you can help them with the data they have and external data. Outside of work, I have a 2-year-old daughter who's lots of fun. Apart from that as well, I am a very active member in my church. I'm a church youth group leader, and that's quite important to me as well. I like to stay fit, so this is me cycling on a cycling trip for charity from Munich in Germany to Venice in Italy. Amazing. I did it in 5 days, by the way, in case you think I went straight. It was a great experience. And I am a crazy fan of football / soccer. So I love to speak, watch, and play football. And this is me in Russia at the World Cup a few months ago, and that was a great experience. Enough about me. Hope that gives you kind of a quick overview. Before I start, just a warning. There are no formulas in my presentation tonight. I intentionally made this presentation very non-technical. I thought I'd leave the technical part to Sachin after me, and I think you'll get plenty of technical material there. I want to challenge you tonight. You know, as a person who works with data scientists, I'm not a data scientist as such, I'm an actuary, as you heard. I work with data scientists, and I can see the potential that data science has, and a lot of my time is spent basically trying to bring that to clients. So I want to give you almost like a different perspective to data science. It won't be hardcore technical, but I want to try to challenge you maybe to look past the technical and think more big picture and really bring data science to life, as I've titled the presentation. So I'm going to present to you tonight with a concept that I hope you find hopefully interesting and maybe even helpful. So I'll try not to speak for too long so that we can maybe have a discussion at the end. Speaking of which, just a bit of a funny story. So there was a speaker once speaking at a similar event like this, and he went on and on and on, and people started to doze off, and everyone was getting very restless, and he's just going on and on. And then he realized that the audience were a bit restless, so he kind of said, "Oh, I think I've spoken for a bit too long. Is there a clock anywhere?" And a voice came from the audience saying, "No, there's no clock, but there's a calendar on the back wall." So I promise you tonight, you won't need a calendar. I'm hoping that my iPhone clock will do. So, human behavior is a very interesting subject matter, right? Study humans and behavior, and it's very complex. And as you may have read in the summary of today's talk, a lot of the data being collected these days is trying to capture something about human behavior. And a lot of the models that you guys build these days are trying to predict, again, another kind of aspect of human behavior and what humans will do in future. A big problem I see in my work is that a lot of clients have very clever data scientists who build very, very clever models, very accurate models, with great insights, very interesting insights, but nothing gets done with the insights. They just put on the shelf. The data scientists are happy because they've built, some sort of very cool models, but nothing happens. So there's almost like there's a last step that needs to be focused on. A predictive model, at best, if you think about it, can point us in the right direction of where to focus. But it can't really tell you what to do about it or actually make the desired outcome happen. Let me explain. So when I'm dealing with human behavior, if I want human beings to act a certain way, a model will be able to predict for me whether they're going to act that way or not, but it will not prompt that behavior change. Okay? What if we could not only, using data science, not only predict an outcome, but actually influence that outcome? Data science becomes a lot more powerful. And that's where behavioral economics comes in. So I'm sure you've heard of the term behavioral economics. Traditional economics assumes that human beings are perfectly rational beings that are always trying to maximize profit, maximize gain. But behavioral economics takes economics and psychology and tries to understand human behavior even when that behavior is irrational. Because a lot of the times, you'd be surprised, us humans are very irrational. So in particular, something that comes in very, very handy is something called nudge theory. You can put your hands up if you've heard of an American professor called Richard Thaler. Heard of Richard Thaler? Okay, some people have. Richard Thaler has actually become famous recently because he won the Nobel Prize for Economics very recently for his work in nudge theory. So nudge theory argues that if you want to influence someone's behavior, rather than give them a rule, a law, a regulation, try to force them to act a certain way, if you just indirectly suggest something, or by using positive reinforcement, that often can be a lot more effective than legislation, rules, and regulation. Okay? So let me tell you a line from a movie. Let's see if you know what movie this is. Here's me planting an idea in your mind. I say, don't think of elephants. What are you thinking about? That's a line from the movie Inception. The idea is that if I suggest something to you, as I said, it could be a lot more powerful to influence your behavior than a rule. So Richard Thaler is a behavioral economist, professor in the University of Chicago, and he wrote a very famous book called Nudge, explaining this whole nudge theory idea. So let me give you a few examples of nudge theory to bring it to life. So by understanding psychology, human beings dislike change, which naturally are averse to change. So if I set the default option as the optimal option, most people won't bother to change. Example, in the office recently, they changed the default setting on the printers to be double-sided. Saved a lot of paper. Because us humans, we just can't be bothered changing. So if you set the optimal as the default, that's a very powerful nudge to influence people's behavior. Another thing is people love to conform to social norms, right? So if I tell you that everybody else is doing it, will that affect the chances that you would do it too? And again, another thing about human beings is that we hate being last when compared to others. We hate coming in last place. They did a piece of research once where they were researching people queuing up for anything, for retail, or anything. You're in a queue, you're lining up. And if you are last in the queue, your level of annoyance is very, very high. Right? If a person comes and just stands behind you, your level of annoyance drops. Think about it though, your waiting time hasn't changed, your position hasn't changed, but just the fact that you're not last makes a difference. Therefore, the application, if I tell you, if I'm an insurance company, and I tell you that your driving habits are in the worst percentile compared to people your age, would that maybe nudge you to drive a bit safer? If I told you that your household energy consumption is like the worst in the street, Would that maybe nudge you to start switching lights off when you don't use them? Another very common nudge is anchoring. So if you walk into a store and you want to buy a certain product, and you see a sign on top of that product saying maximum 6 per customer, you might think, maybe I'll buy 2 instead of 1 then. Right, so I've just anchored you to the level of 6, so even if you're at 1, you'll naturally gravitate towards the anchor. So these are kind of some applications of nudges. Let me show you some real life nudges. Here's an example from Hamburg. They were bidding for the 2024 Olympics. So this is in their underground. Now you have to admit, the stairs never looked so appealing, right? And I bet if they measured the speed people went up the stairs, it'd be a lot quicker than the average, just simply because of the motivation they've got there. Here's one nudge that you may have noticed on Sydney trains. Again, this is all about the social norms, telling you that 9 out of 10 people pay their fares. Okay, here's a very sophisticated nudge that I wanted to show you. This comes from Schiphol Airport in Amsterdam. So they had a problem in Amsterdam with, it's hard to explain, so I'll just show you the nudge. They had a problem with spillages in the urinals. So this genius economist came up with this idea of, if I get a sticker that looks like an insect and I stick it in the urinal, maybe it'll help people aim better. Apparently, the results was that this decreased spillages by 80%. Don't ask me how they measured it. I'll take your word for it. So as it turns out, if you give men a target, they can't help but aim at it. Okay, one of the first applications of nudge theory actually started in the UK around the year 2012. The British government had a behavioural insights team put together, full of behavioural scientists. And in the UK, if you are late paying your taxes, the government will send you a letter reminding you to pay up. So these behavioural scientists thought, let's try an experiment. For a random group of taxpayers who are late, we're going to add one line to their letter, just one line. And this was the line. They wrote in the letter, 9 out of 10 people in your town, whatever that town is, so personalised to you, pay their taxes on time. As a result of that, they got 23% more people paying their tax than the control group, which didn't get that sentence in their letter. They call this sentence the £190 million sentence. Think about the power of this. I mean, this is very entertaining and very interesting, but think about the power of this. By just changing the way you communicate and your words, you could save or make millions. Many governments are now utilising behavioural nudges. So the US are leaders in this, the UK, as mentioned, and the New South Wales government as well has a behavioural insights unit that I've met. They've had them since 2012, and they're working on such important issues like domestic violence and child support. So, the point I want to make tonight is this. Behavioural nudges are very effective, as I just showed you with some examples. Predictive analytics and data science, as you all know, very effective. But when you combine the two, right, the whole is greater than the sum of the parts. And it's like a marriage made in heaven. Let me give you an example of how the two were combined. In 2012, in the US, there was a presidential election. If you remember, it was Obama versus Romney. This was actually called the first big data election. So both the Romney and Obama teams hired teams of data scientists. And the job of the data scientists was effectively to maximize the effort of the volunteer workers who are going to go around, knocking on doors and encouraging people to vote. So the data scientists built models that will identify the hardcore Obama fans, the hardcore Romney fans, but the group of interest was the group in the middle, those who could be swayed, who were sitting on the fence. And the volunteer workers targeted them. Okay? So that's the analytics and data science doing its job by segmenting the population and telling you where to focus. Then comes the behavioral nudges. So these volunteers went knocking on doors for that segment, and what they would do is they would ask people, they would have cards with Obama's picture on it, and they called it commitment cards. And they would ask people, once they talk about Obama and convince them to vote for Obama, they would ask people to sign, because as you know in America, voting is not compulsory. So they would ask people to sign saying, I commit to vote for Obama. That's actually a very, very powerful nudge. Us human beings, if we commit to something, especially if we put our name down, to commit, we're actually a lot more likely to follow through with it than if we don't. Another nudge they used was that they asked people to articulate in detail what they would do on voting day, how would they get to the polling booth, where would they vote, what time would they go. Because if you formulate a plan in your mind and you visualize that, again, you're a lot more likely to follow through than if you don't. Another nudge they used was that they would tell them things like, all your neighbors on the street are going to vote for Obama. So that was an example of data science working together with behavioral science and coming up with some very, very, very powerful results. So again, as I was saying, when you combine the two, not only can you predict an outcome, but then you can influence the outcome as well. And you enhance the power of data science and you bring data science to life. Okay, so how does it work in practice? I mean, this will be very simple for you guys. So you use a test kind of and learn approach. So what you do is you use a randomized control trial where your model, as I explained, will segment your population. You take the segment that you want to focus on, you divide it up into random groups, you keep a control group and other groups with different nudges, and you test. And you see what the results of the nudges are and how effective they are compared to the control groups. Obviously, beware of bias. So you have to kind of understand the context, what's happening, so that you don't attribute the success to a nudge when really there's a bias in your sample. You can also design the most effective nudge for each group. So this is actually quite powerful. So we were talking to a client a few weeks ago about an insurance client, about effectively building a model to segment your claimants, people who claim on your insurance policy, and you basically segment them. So this was a workers' compensation insurer. So if you get injured at work, they pay you until you recover. A big problem for these insurers is the return to work duration. People stay out of work for a very long time because they're getting paid. How can I encourage people to come back to work earlier? So we were talking about this concept where if you build models to segment your population based on how long they're expected to stay out of work, right? The model will tell you, will inform you as to, for example, if I have a segment that's going to stay out of work for a very long time, or a specific individual, I can tell as to the variables using the model what is causing that impact, what is causing this person to stay out of work for such a long time. So just say one thing could be if it's, one thing we found, say for example, that will determine how fast you get back to work is how far away you live from work. Kind of makes sense, but you wouldn't think of it. The model showed us that the further away you live from work, the longer it takes to get back to work. So that in itself is a very interesting insight, because if I know that, then I can target a specific nudge to that group by, for example, okay, I know you're far away from work, I'll pay for your taxi every day to come to work. I'll allow you to work from home. I'll relocate you. I can tailor my nudge based on what my model tells me to have more effective outcomes. Another example, say for an insurer, is if I'm calculating the risk, I'm mentioning insurance, so I work a lot in insurance and banking. I'm measuring the risk of a certain policy. Say I'm insuring a house, and this policy comes out very, very risky. Why? Because there's very high theft in that area. Or maybe a nudge could be, okay, encourage the policyholder to install an alarm, and then I'll reduce the premium. So it's that kind of thing. So that's where your data science can really inform the way you deal with the outcome. So just as data analytics will bring scientific rigor to the process of estimating quantity or predicting, behavioral economics will also bring scientific rigor to the usually kind of judgment-driven approach of deciding what to do to prompt behavioral change once your model tells you. So the traditional way of doing data science is, as you can see, so you've got the data, you kind of do initial insights on your raw data, you come up with your algorithms, and then you monitor the results. But once you combine behavioral economics, you add the idea of designing a nudge, as I mentioned, and then testing that nudge, and then monitoring. Okay, so let me show you a real-life case study before I finish. So this was actually a piece of work that we did, actually our US colleagues and some of the guys in my team currently worked on this project. In the US, they estimate that more than $4 billion of unemployment benefits get paid to individuals who do not qualify for unemployment benefits. So you can call them fraudulent claims, but mainly soft fraud. So nothing hard, just soft fraud. People not being honest, things like that will just increase the payments, and $4 billion later, the government is overspending. So what happened is the government of New Mexico, state in the US, engaged Deloitte to look at this problem for them, for the state of New Mexico, and find out ways to basically to decrease the fraud or the overpayments. So the way it works in the US is this: everything's done online. When you first lose your job, you go online and you basically lodge that you've lost your job. And then every week after that, you log on again and basically report on what you've done throughout the week. Have you looked for work? Have you worked? And based on your answers, you get paid unemployment benefits straight to your bank account. So obviously, and I'm sure I don't need to tell you this, but if you feel that you're interacting with a computer rather than a human being, it's a lot easier to lie. So obviously that makes it a lot more easier to commit fraud. So the first thing that the team did was they basically looked at all the data and tried to analyze where are the three main areas in the process where this honest information is given by the applicants. So Deloitte worked with the Department of Workforce Solutions, or DWS, to identify those main areas. And the areas were as such, those three areas you see on the screen. First area is the initial application. So when you lose your job and you go on to register, you're asked one question. You're asked, were you fired or were you made redundant? If you're fired, you're not really eligible for unemployment benefits. So obviously it's in your best interest to say, no, I was made redundant. Okay, so that was a big area where people were dishonest. Another area was every week when you log on, they ask you, have you earned any income in the last week? If you say yes, they ask you how much. If, say, you earned $100 over the last week, they'll deduct $100 from your benefits. So again, it's in your best interest to say, I earned $0. So again, that was another area. The third area was the work search criteria. So again, in the US, they have a criteria that you need to have at least 2 work search activities: attend an interview, apply for a job to be eligible. Okay, so there were the 3 areas that this honest information comes in. So the team built predictive models in real time to predict, as the applicant is online, to predict the propensity for fraud in these 3 steps. Right? Now, that's where data science kind of stops. Traditionally, what would you do as the government of New Mexico? You would ramp up resources, investigate these people, and cost a lot of money and resources. But the team decided to implement some behavioral nudges in real time on the screen as the applicant is going for it. So let me talk you through a real life example. So imagine I lose my job. Okay? I go online, I register. It tells me, did you get fired or were you made redundant? So I think, I got fired, but to be honest, my boss hated me from day one, right? And he's very unfair. He always had to inform me, and it was very, very unfair. So you know what? I was made redundant. Okay? The model picks me up as high propensity for fraud. So the nudge that was applied was a pop-up comes on the screen with a letter addressed to my boss by name and asking if Bassem Morris was made redundant. He's applied for unemployment benefit, please confirm. Just show me, FYI, we're going to send this to your boss. As you can imagine, it was a very effective nudge for people to go back and say, actually, I was fired. I go on every week, I'm logging on to report on my weekly activity. One week I log on, they asked me, did you earn any income the last week? So I think to myself, well, I did a few shifts at McDonald's, but that's pocket change. And plus everyone else is doing it. Everyone else is working and not reporting it. So you know what? No, I didn't report it. Again, the model picks me up, a pop-up comes on the screen saying 99 out of 100 people in your county report their earnings accurately. Do you want to go back and change your answer? That, surprisingly, was the most powerful nudge. Out of all the ones applied, they tested about 30 nudges. That was the most powerful nudge, which was a surprise to me. Just telling people that everybody else is honest, for some reason, is a huge nudge for us. Another thing that you could do as nudges as well is you could, if you're picked up as high propensity for fraud, is ask follow-up questions that were not asked last week to make the person feel like, oh, someone's watching me here, they're asking me extra questions this week, why? Another nudge that was applied was asking you to put your initials down after you've reported, write your initials in, and that was another powerful nudge. With the work search criteria elements, by asking claimants to specify exactly what they're going to do over the next week, how many jobs they're going to apply for, how they're going to apply, newspaper, phone, just by doing that, by committing to that, was a huge, huge success in increasing people's likelihood of finding work. So the result of the project, people were twice more likely to report earnings accurately because of that nudge. They were half as likely to commit fraud and 20% more likely to find work. So by combining predictive analytics with behavioral science and making some minor tweaks to the way you communicate, you can save millions, as I said. I want to draw your attention to the power of this. But the models are great, and you know, you're all great at marketing, but if you step back a bit and think outside the model as well, you can have some amazing, amazing results. So some other applications to give you an idea of how nudges could be used. So as I said, I work on insurance and banking, so I'll give you some insurance examples. So again, return to work for workers' compensation is a big deal for insurers, trying to get people back to work quicker. There's an insurer that tried a few nudges that were very, very successful. So initially, when people got injured, they were put on the injury management plan. Right? But they thought, what if we change the name of that from injury management plan to return to work plan? So the focus is more on the recovery rather than on the injury. That proved to be a very successful nudge. Again, another thing they did was that they asked for personal commitment from the claimants to do rehab and to put a plan together for recovery. Another thing they did which was very effective was at the time of as soon as you get injured, they anchor you by saying to you, most people with this injury recover in 3 weeks. See, I've anchored you now. Because initially you may be thinking, I'm going to be out for a year. But I've anchored you down to 3 weeks. So little nudges like that can really make a big impact to a lot of the firms. Road safety as well. So I was reading about an example where a company was employed to reduce accidents on roads. So again, they used predictive models to predict the danger spots and intersections. And then there was a stretch of road where people used to speed quite a lot. So what they did was they applied a very clever nudge where they made, you know the lines between the lanes? They made them shorter and closer together progressively. So as you're driving, it feels like you're going quicker, but really you're going at the same speed because the lines are getting shorter and quicker. It gives you that impression that you're going quicker and you slow down. So I thought that was quite a clever nudge. The advantage of using nudges is that it's a soft touch approach. So for example, with the fraud example, the model picks someone up as high propensity for fraud. I don't go and arrest them. I just apply a very soft nudge. I haven't discriminated. I haven't stopped payments from someone because the model could be wrong. So it's just a soft touch approach that won't hurt and can have some very, very powerful results. So some tips on nudging. So I'm almost done. Just some tips to keep in mind. Number one, nudge at the right time. So I read of a travel insurer who, when you buy travel insurance when you're traveling, they ask you, do you want to insure your baggage? Most time you go, I'll be fine. No. But what about this? What if the insurer could somehow tell through maybe IoT that you're at the check-in desk now at the airport checking in, right? And your bag is just on the belt, and you're seeing your bag drift away from you. And then they ask you, now do you want to insure your luggage? But it's the time of the nudge makes a big difference. Secondly, keep it simple. Us humans, we hate hassle. We get too many options, because often we go back and regret that I didn't pick one option over the other. So keep it very simple, reduce the hassle factor, and use the power of defaults, as I mentioned. Make the optimal solution the default solution. Focus is very important, as I mentioned. Focus on the positive, focus on the outcome you want, rather than the negative outcome. Anchoring is more important than you think. Make it personal. Using someone's name in a communication makes a huge difference than if you didn't use a name. There was a government office that used to send, it was like a government employment office, like Centrelink. They used to send out texts to people before they would interview. Their participation rates were very low. People wouldn't show up to interviews. So they did some very, very simple tweaks. They added the person's name to the text. Hi Bassem, your interview is at 2 p.m. at such a place. They added the name of the advisor looking after you. Best regards, John. And then they added the words, good luck. That tripled participation. See, little tweaks like that could really impact the way human beings behave. And lastly, ask for commitment. Ask them to write down the plan, and even share it with others and be accountable to others. Some parting thoughts on nudges. As I said, beware of biases. Secondly, this is very, very important and critical, nudge for good. No unethical nudging. Your goal when you're nudging is to help people do what they want to do, but may not have the willpower to do it. So that's our aim. And in conclusion, dare to be purple. What I mean by that is this is an idea that we developed at Deloitte. Red on the diagram resembles the technical analytical people. The blue resembles the business people. You don't understand models and have no idea. The ones that Eugene was mentioning should go to that data literacy course. No idea about data. I know what the business problem is. A data scientist may love the models, love the data, but not fully understand the context. It's so powerful when you can combine those two and become a purple data scientist. If you can bridge that gap between the models and the actual business problem, think of the impact that we can make if we could do that. It's very easy to find red people, and it's very easy to find blue people, but to find purple people, that's priceless. So I encourage you to show your purpleness. And finally, last slide, don't forget that our objective with everything we're doing is insightful action. Often we as technical people, and I'm actually being a technical person like you, we love to focus on the how. So when I'm given a problem, I think, how do I solve this problem? What algorithm should I use? What parameters, how am I going to solve this problem? But maybe we should step back a bit and ask, why am I solving this problem? What action is needed at the end of this to solve the problem? What decision needs to be made as a result of my model? Because you need an action to solve the problem, not a model. You need an actual action. And if that action is backed up by insight from the model, that's very, very powerful. I can come up with the most interesting insights, but if the business doesn't use it, it's literally useless. And I think that sometimes the simplest models are a lot more useful than the most complicated models, just because they can be used. And I feel that an appreciation of behavioral economics and human behavior will give you that extra edge on understanding the problem and coming up with a very viable solution. And just to end up with a quote that I read that I really liked: action with a little insight is better than no action with all the insight that can be discovered. Thank you very much. Can I just say before questions, I just want a disclaimer. I don't have all the answers. I may not have any of the answers. So I encourage you, feel free to ask questions definitely, but I'd be very interested as well to hear your perspectives. So if you have a perspective, feel free to share it, please. I'd be very, very keen to hear it.
Thank you. It seems you've done quite a bit of looking into this nudge theory and the idea of positive versus negative reinforcement. This or a similar idea did come up in the first chapter of Dale Carnegie's famous book, Winning Friends and Influencing People, from the 1930s and the 40s. And I'm just wondering, because that book is now, it's more divine than it is in man. It's such a legendary status. I guess there's more comment, to say that. Yeah, but has any of the material in that book, has it influenced any of your work in any way? Or your presentation, or?
I have to be honest, I've learned a lot about that book. I actually haven't read it, but I think the work that Richard Thaler did was to really formalize it and to really bring it to life. I'm sure there's probably been a because if you think about it, what I've just described there, marketing people have been doing this all along. It's not very new, but I think Richard Thaler has actually formalized it, brought it to life, and actually applied it. I think that's maybe where the missing thing is, actually applying it with proven results. So I think that's a difference. But sorry, I haven't actually read the book, so I can't comment on the details of the book.
It's slightly different objective and context, but it's the basic root message is the same.
Yeah. It's basically basic psychology, if you think about it at the end of the day. It is basic psychology. Yeah. Okay, we've got a few. Okay.
I never thought I'd actually be asking this question, but a while back I met with describes himself as a political consultant who helps politicians get into power through, of all things, memes. And after hearing what you described up here, he uses effectively nudge theory to get ideas through your sort of defense mechanisms. Every time you see an opinion that disagrees with you, he makes you laugh first, and then whilst you're laughing, he implants this political idea in your head, like vote for this person, or this guy's actually funny, or whatnot, which is now making me ask the question. It's just like everything that he described to me, like it's nudge theory. It gets past your initial defense mechanism. Where do you see other, like, what I'm trying to ask is, what is the future of nudge theory? What are areas outside of, say, for example, politics and sales and insurance, where do you see nudge theory being applied, and where is it underdeveloped?
That's a great question. I think nudge theory could be used, to be honest, in any area. The governments are leading the way, as I said, not necessarily with politics, like getting people to vote for certain people, but it's more kind of for the good of society, so reducing people's speed, reducing fraud, that kind of thing. You know, as I mentioned, helping with child support, domestic violence, those kind of things. So I have to say the governments are leading. Insurers and banks are catching up. Like I'm seeing a lot of my clients, there's a lot of interest in it these days. They're all wanting to get into it. But I think the problem as well with it, and maybe the reason why it hasn't caught on so quickly, is that us as technical people, we like the numbers, we like the facts. This seems very fluffy, like, do you know what I mean? But I think there's a lot of power in it. And as I said, insurers are starting to use it now. Other areas, obviously marketing and sales, huge area. Sports as well. I was speaking to someone in sports. They're starting to use it in terms of the player's psychology and the athlete's psychology. But to be honest, you can use it anywhere. And I guess it's up to you to look at the areas you work in as data scientists, the models you build, and think, can I apply nudge theory to overcome that last step that I talked about, of actually making the model useful? Can I do that?
Hi. When the nudge carries a value of population performance, like 9 out of 10 people, obviously that's not a fact. That's an optimistic outlook. How far does the reality of the situation have to be away from the nudge in order for the nudge to be of any value?
That's a very good question, actually. I have to say, I'm not sure if it's always not true, but hey, let's assume that sometimes it is. I think naturally it has to be believable for it to be effective. Like if I say to you, I don't know, 99 out of 100 people go to the gym. Like, come on, man, like seriously. So I think it has to be believable in order for us. It has to be very close to reality. Yep.
How far is it from the true behavior of the population?
How far? I'd say 0.1. I don't know. I don't know how you measure it.
If it was 8 out of 10 people did it and they produce a nudge for 9 out of 10 people, is that the way to go, or do we have a baseline value of 5 out of 10 people, and we want to bring it to 9?
Look, I don't think there's a science. I think it depends on the context, and because again, it is a bit of a soft science. It's not again. I'm like, I want to go back to the numbers. Like, give me hard facts, but this is more softer, and then this is more about making it believable. It has to be believable in order for you to be nudged. So I guess that could be different for different people as well. So you have to know your audience and the context in order to come up with the right level. Yeah.
Very quick question. So you talk about like how to make people to comply with like the norm, but what about the different situation where like in organization you want someone to be like creative, to be like different, like out of the cloud, and so what would be the application of that?
Of course.
In the opposite direction.
And of course, and I hope you didn't misunderstand me, I am not saying the whole point of this is to get everyone to comply to the norm. That's not what I'm saying at all. But I'm saying in certain circumstances, for example with fraud, yes, you want people to be honest, but not always. And that's actually a very good point you're raising. The point I want to make is that not every nudge works in every circumstance. Like again, it's all about the context, your audience, and what you're trying to achieve. And again, I will reiterate, you're nudging for good. You're not trying to influence people or manipulate them. What you're doing is you are helping them do what they actually want to do, but they don't have enough willpower to do. So that's very important. But definitely you're not trying to make everyone conform. No, definitely not. Definitely not.
So how do you see those two fields, behavioral economics and data science, coming together and synergizing? So what is your vision of the purple guy you had in the middle? For example, Are you seeing this data science building models that can help design new nudges? Are you seeing this data science helping or looking at subpopulation analysis? Are you seeing, what is your vision for it?
Sure. I think as a start, so I'll give you an example. Obviously there's a spectrum, but our chief data scientist at Deloitte, he's an actuary, data scientist, and has a PhD in behavioral science. Right? So that's very unique. He's a people person. He's a people person. But I think initially, maybe as we're trying to build this, we at least have to have purple teams, right? So maybe teams of data scientists and teams of behavioral scientists working together. So I was talking to a behavioral economics at Deloitte, behavioral economist at Deloitte about this, and he loved it. He said to me, you don't understand, when we do our experimentation, we don't really have any technical rigor to them. It's kind of haphazard. So I would love to have someone technical, we need to even help me segment the population, tell me where to focus, and then measure my results. That would be priceless. So I think I see teams working together, but I would encourage you as data scientists to at least be aware that there's something beyond the model. So there's a bigger world, there's a bigger context where the model sits, and I need to be aware of that. I think that in itself is powerful as a starting point. And then eventually you can be all purple people.
Well, that was the last question. Can you please all join me in thanking Bassem for...
Hi, I'm Jim Pearce. I'm the Director of Health Policy Analysis, which is a consulting firm in healthcare. It was with great pleasure that we've been able to sponsor the videoing of the latest meetup of Data Science Sydney.